Hi, her name is Emma Kay, and she is a first-time author of a soon-to-be-published book, The Terrible Truth About the Truth, the story of a Rwandan Tutsi genocide survivor, when home doesn't feel like home and when abroad feels far from home. For those who haven't had a chance to listen to Emma's YouTube audios and who want to know more about her soon-to-be-published book, I invite you to listen to her first YouTube audio, but also listen to her other audios so that you remember to never, ever take anything for granted. Today, Emma and I will take a minute to talk about what she didn't write in her book and the reason why she didn't. And we will take another minute to talk about the crimes committed against innocent Rwandans. In The Terrible Truth About the Truth, the genocide survivor, Emma, shares her life experience. But contrary to what the reader may anticipate, the genocide and other killings take a relatively small part in Emma's book when you know how many of these atrocities she went through. Not because those subjects weren't important or worth talking about, but because of many reasons. One of the reasons, as Emma says, is that her writing was driven by inspiration and feeling rather than facts, but also, as she states, there are topics that she didn't talk about in detail because she didn't feel comfortable enough talking about them, or she felt they could have been better told by someone else, or simply because they weren't fitting in her book's title. For instance, the topic of how the Tutsis are governing her beloved country, Rwanda, is one of those topics that wasn't covered in Emma's book, even if it is a very provoking and frustrating topic, as Emma says it in her own words.
Had you imagined that in 2020 the world will be talking about COVID-19 instead of Vision 2020? I swear to God, every Tutsi, including myself, pictured heaven on earth when imagining how Rwanda would look like after more than 25 years under Tutsi's leadership.
In fact, as Emma says, Emma didn't know that as a genocide survivor, she would be crying day and night for the killings, disappearances, and imprisonments of her fellow genocide survivors, among numerous other innocent victims.
How could I imagine that today my compatriots will be in the streets worldwide protesting against the imprisonment of Idamange?
Idamange is a brave single mother of 4 children and a genocide survivor who dared speaking for silenced Rwandans. She was saying that genocide survivors are finally tired of seeing the genocide becoming the RPF's instrument used to get rid of unwanted people. Idamange made it clear that Rwandans are tired of seeing bones and skeletons of their loved ones used in showcases to attract foreign tourists, COVID-19 used as an excuse to eliminate and punish the poor, or real people missing as if they were needles or other small objects.
How could I imagine that us, Rwandans, will be mourning every year the loss of Kizito Mihigo and the disappearance of Gerard Niyomugabo, both genocide survivors? While no one knows the fate of the researcher Gerard Niyomugabo, since he was simply reported missing, Kizito Mihigo was tortured and killed by President Kagame's men just because him and his friend Gerard were teaching unity and reconciliation between all Rwandans, not knowing that doing so was seen by RPF as a challenge to their divide and rule fundamental policy. How could I imagine that Tutsis, and especially genocide survivors, will be living in fear of their loved ones going missing, like my greatest and favorite poet Bahati Musa, who has now been missing for many weeks? How could I imagine Deom Shahidi, a journalist and a sole survivor from his family, spending so many years behind bars to the point that he is now almost forgotten? How could I imagine that the Rwandan Patriotic Front, RPF, will be silencing every journalist who tries to raise their voice about the Rwandan rights violations, like Chuma Hassan Dieudonné and Agnes Wimana, who have been in and out of Kigali prisons and whose basic rights have been violated? And finally, how could I imagine that my brother-in-law, Asina Paul Rwigara, a Tutsi whose business was prosperous during the Hutus regime and who donated a fortune to RPF, supporting their so-called country liberation cause, would be killed in cold blood by President Kagame's butchers, the head of RPF and a Tutsi like me? This is one of the topics I did not talk about in my book, knowing that Rwigara's children were in the best position to talk or write about it, and I'm pretty sure they will one day.
Unfortunately, Kagame's victims are not only Tutsis or Hutus, they are everyone who criticizes his wrongdoings, whether in Rwanda or anywhere in the world. That's why, if you are someone who is blessed with a democratic country where things seem to follow the right direction, please remember Emma K's advice to never, ever take anything for granted. If you like Emma's stories, please be one of her subscribers to be among the first ones to be notified when her book is published. Thank you, and see you next time.